Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Like weights has not generally been associated with gymnastics. It's all body weights and gymnastics specific. Mm-hmm. But like for me, I just look at myself. I see like, what have I been able to do? How does my gymnastics feel? Like, do the skills feel different? Do they feel easier? Are they better? And again, it's like, I've been able to do some of this stuff in my 30s after having children with a completely different style of training. And I know I put the numbers in, and I'm not going to like say like, hey, you don't have to do the numbers.
Yeah.
But I did put those numbers in, but my gymnastics still felt really good. And some of it felt easier. Like I did a Yurchenko double full on the hard surface, and I hadn't done that since I was 18. Like I didn't even do that when I was 20 at the Olympics. Like I was doing 1.5 at that time. And with a different body, like my body was different. And that was, where I was hesitant on bars. I weighed more, but because everything was just in like a good proportion, like the muscle ratio and everything, the gymnastics wasn't harder. It was better and it was easier. Like, again, I wouldn't have been able to do that vault if I didn't train the way that I did.
So I guess with all you know now, kind of going through the comeback and through tour and through everything, like if you could go time travel back in time and maybe talk to yourself as I wouldn't say the year of the Olympics, that's a very different, but the quad of the Olympics, right? Those 4 years leading up to training and stuff. And what would you go back and tell yourself then in terms of like, what would be maybe good advice to change the way you did things?
I think the biggest thing, because I've thought about this because I knew this question was coming, but the biggest thing was honestly, and not necessarily like a totally different approach, but just a different mindset around conditioning.
Sure.
Because I believe so much, and I know that it's true that like the mind and the body connection of you are focusing on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And like, I am firing my core or this or that, instead of just like going through the motions of doing it because you have to do it. Because we do. If you want to get to that certain level, you do need to be strong. You need to be, your body needs to be ready to do this stuff.
Yep.
And for me, I know my attitude was more, I'm doing this because I have to, and not like focusing on the movements that you were doing and why they were benefiting you and why they had a benefit to the gymnastics. So that to me, like just having that like mind body connection and understanding of like, this is really important and I need to focus on what I'm doing. And that's like I think that's one of been the biggest shifts in my training now, just because I'm doing conditioning because I enjoy doing it, but also because I like feeling strong, and I know how much of a benefit it has, not just on my gymnastics and not just allowing me to do gymnastics, but just on like my overall like health and my outlook. Right. It just improves everything. So having just like that shift in focus has been huge.
Right there, because I know a lot of coaches who are like, I'm all on board. I think it's great, but I tell my kids to do these circuits and they just kind of look at me sideways or kind of like casually get their water bottle, right? So what are your maybe pieces of advice to coaches who are now trying to go into maybe the summer, not to date the podcast that's coming up, but it's going to be pretty much all the grunt work, so to speak.
It is. I know. And that is one of the hardest parts to get through to the kids that way. And I talk to them a lot. The biggest thing I'm going to say that works for me is when I jump in and do it.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah.
It makes such a big difference, because if their attitude is like, well, we're doing this because I have to do it. And if I go in and I am all in 100% giving this effort, it lifts and brings everybody else up. And it's the same circuit, or do it. I'm like, all right, let's see if we can beat our numbers from last round. You count your jumping jacks and burpees, and then everybody's like also giving 100%. And that doesn't mean you have to jump in and do all of the conditioning and all of the numbers every single day with them. But if you're choosing to do it a couple of times a week, and if you are leading by example, they are going to follow. Because again, now with me, like being a mom and coaching now a really young group of kids, they watch you and they observe you even when you don't think so. And even when you don't think they're listening, they are.
Yeah.
And they take it all in and they see you. And it's like, to me, it's so funny. Like when I go downstairs, like I have a little workout area down here, my kids will pick up because I had to buy small enough dumbbells so they could have, because they needed their own. But I'll just watch Audrey or Dashiell and they'll just like join in, or they'll go down and they'll start doing like their push-ups. And I'm like, I'm not telling them to do this. They just watch me do it and then they think it's fun. And they only do a few, but it's like they're watching. And if they don't think that it's something you would do themselves, they're going to be like, oh, they're just telling me to do this.
And something you said there is so important, though, which I still see deep rooted in the gymnastics culture, is using skills to get conditioned, right? And I think that's a very risky thing to do. And so one, because gymnastics has gotten so much harder in the last years, but like I think about what my coach had me do to get in cardio shape for floor routines. It was like a half routine and then a floor routine and then 2 routines. And then like, it was just more and more volume. And like, yes, you could say like a watered down set with sled pushes is a good in between, but you have to realize that there's so much more you can do to get somebody's body ready, cardio wise or strength wise or power wise, before you do that like kind of classic like endurance bar set or endurance floor set that I think still needs to be definitely taught in the gymnastics community. And so I think like what you said is so valuable, of getting conditioned first and then slowly introducing the routines themselves, because all it takes is one tired double back on your last pass or one tired dismount to land short and really have an injury that holds you back for a long time. And I, like I said, have a lot of empathy for coaches, because I think that stuff is really nerdy to try to learn those kind of things. And I try my best to dilute that information. But if you can use a good like 6-week block to get somebody in great shape before you start introducing routines or even half sets or back-to-back bar sets and stuff, like the value of that is so important. And then you can kind of build up the mental toughness, the grind aspect of like pushing to the end of a bar routine when you're tired, but only if you've, I guess, earned the right to do that through the physical prep, because it's so dangerous.
It is. And like I said, it didn't work. And I just know, like looking back and knowing my career, it was always just like this up of down of in shape, out of shape, in shape, out of shape. And it was just such like an unhealthy way of doing that and looking at it. But that's just like where my mindset is and was at that time. Like, okay, I went so hard. Now I get to relax and eat whatever I want. And then it's like, oh crap. And it goes so quickly. It was just not a good place to be in. It was not a good like relationship, like with food and with my body and with conditioning. And, I made it through and was able to, peak at the right times. But I look at like this as like solely on, of like kind of like my health and discovery and journey like that. Like this has been such a much bigger success.
I'm so happy you mentioned that. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Just it was success of being able to sustain a certain like level of fitness for, oh my gosh, going on 3 years now. And I definitely like have like my ups and downs with it, but I've never gotten so out of shape where I've had to work so hard to get back into it.
Yeah. I'm so happy you mentioned that, because that is, that is definitely one of the elephant in the room topics that I think nobody talks about. Is it still happens subconsciously in the culture, is this combination of a lot of young female athletes tell me in private that like it's the combination of lifting and food that I'm scared to get heavy. And then I'll get heavy and I will be there'll be like some psychological warfare about comments in the gym, or my skills won't feel as good. And so then it becomes this, I have to do an hour of cardio and run before practice to get light, quote unquote, so that I'm like, aesthetically what I want to look like. And like, it happens for guys too. Like, I think that there's a lot of discussion around the female athlete, but like a lot of guy gymnasts struggle a lot with that exact same thing of like, if I lift or eat, I'll get big, I won't have skills, I'll gain weight, and then I need to get light, quote unquote. So I'm going to crush myself in cardio and not eat. They're going to, restrict themselves, and then their energy completely tanks and they start to snowball injuries and they can't get through their practices. And it's this vicious cycle with so much mental health. And so I'm really happy you said that, because that is by far and away still the biggest issue we see around conditioning, lifting weights, and food altogether.
Absolutely. And it's not an easy cycle to break out of. And it's really hard, like when you're in it. And it took me like how many years now after the fact of being able to, to figure out what works, because what works for me isn't going to work for somebody else. Everybody works a little bit differently. Everybody has a little bit different motivation. Everybody needs a little bit different variety of foods or this or that. And it took me, like I said, now I'm almost going to be 34. It took me that many years to figure out what is like works for me, what's sustainable for me. It's not a fad diet, because those never work long term. Those don't ever work long term. So it was figuring out how I could live my life, enjoy my life, and also maintain a certain level of fitness that I liked for me. And again, what works for me doesn't work for you, or what your goal is in fitness isn't mine, but I like where I'm at, and I'm proud of what I've been able to figure out for myself.
It's like adult sleepaway camp for like fun fitness things, right? So if you can find a place where you can go and enjoy yourself and have fun, but learn something like a hobby, like, man, that's so cool. Like, and so I'm honestly surprised that it hasn't been something that's like already set in stone that everyone's doing. But I mean, I'm your number one cheerleader. So,
well, thank you. No, I'm so excited. I'm, really, really looking forward to both of those weekends. And I hope it just helps continue like the momentum of the adult gymnastics movement and the community, and hoping, more gyms start to offer it. And I know literally from firsthand experience, like with our gym and watching my mom, how hard it is to incorporate and find time in the schedule, especially if the gyms are full. But there is a need and a want in the gymnastics community for adults to go in. And it's like, for me, obviously, like, again, it's my happy place. It's where I go to work out and to have fun and to be fit. And I know a lot of other people who want that opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, I proudly treat two 65 and 70-year-old gymnasts who are still competing and are training actively. So it's pretty amazing. But yeah, I think the other piece too that people forget is they think that adult gymnastics is like the separate satellite division of gymnastics, but the trickle down of what that does to the culture is really, really impactful for the younger generation, right? Because if people see 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old people still doing gymnastics, it chops down that narrative that like you got to get everything done by 15 to get your stuff done by 18, and then like you're just wrap it up, right? And I think as we see adult gymnastics become more standard and you're encouraging that, we also see, like I said, Ellie Black and Ellie Downey and these people who are 25, 26, 30, 30 plus are still involved in high level gymnastics. Like, it really makes me personally, it makes me rethink, like, what am I doing with the 10 to 14 year olds that I work with? And what am I doing? And obviously I know like college recruiting, there's a whole bunch of like rules and stuff that still need to go in place. But like, it really makes you, when you see people doing gymnastics at 30 to 70, and then you think about the people who are now with NIL able to do gymnastics elite and college, it really makes you scratch your head around like, what are we doing with 8-year-old, 10-year-old, hamster wheel, get on this level of success and go right away. I think there's a benefit to talent ID, but at the same time, it's like, do you really need to push that hard when someone's going through puberty, or can we pause the brakes here a little bit?
I feel like we can take a chill. I mean, I feel like we can take a little bit of a chill, and I feel like the attitude has shifted a little bit since COVID, but I feel like we can take a chill too if somebody wants to go on vacation for a week or miss this here or there, and it's not going to be the end of the world, and you just kind of have to ease back into it. Nobody lost like all of their skills. It might have taken some time to get it back, but I think it was a message to know that we can take a chill, and it's not the end of the world if you miss a week or two. But yes, but also understand too that yes, it will take tweaking. You can't just jump right back into it,
right?
Because that's not smart either. But to allow our bodies the time that they would need. If you're doing this or coming back from this or that, or like I said, or if you just need a break, I think that's okay.